if there was 1 year there we need a Saal Mubarak in the last 4 or 5 summers, I think this is it, right? So, Naye Saal ki Shubhkamnaएं, Nuttan Varsha Abhinandan, Happy New Year, whatever you call it. The question to Rhythm Desai is, will the new Samvat usher in a Happy New Year for Indian equity investors and maybe for global markets as well, because he's a keen eye on the globe. And Rhythm, thank you so much, of course, for joining in as we do every year now for the last so many. And I wonder if a lot has changed between the last 5 months that we spoke 5 months ago and now, because the world still seems to be one tweet or a Truth Social post away from uncertainty. Is it possible to aspire a Happy New Year when such circumstances surround us?
First of all, to all your viewers, Shubh Deepavali and Nuttan Varashna Abhinandan to the Gujarati viewers. And before I start, I want to tell your viewers that you did an amazing interview with Manish and Ramesh, and everybody should see that.
Okay.
That's a 101 on how to invest, because we may not get into that territory, but those are two geniuses from our stock market, and it was a brilliant interview, as you always do.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, the world, I mean, see, Neeraj, uncertainty is part of life. Okay, I will tell you something. When I was walking into this room, one of my colleagues walked past and she said, "Oh, so you're doing an interview?" I said, "Yes, maybe the last one of my life." And she said, "Why would you say that?" So I said, "This morning could have been the last one of my life." The point is, uncertainty is so underestimated. And we only feel it when it creates events around us. When we lose a near or dear one, when the markets move a lot. But life is uncertain. So there's nothing unique about the circumstances today. It has always been uncertain in the stock market. I think the epitome of uncertainty is the stock market, and it remains so. Do I have any idea what will happen in the next 12 months? No. Did I have any idea 12 months ago? No. What we do is lay down a framework so that you can think through it. And the most important thing that you can do is sit through that. Because sitting tight and doing nothing is the best way to accumulate wealth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
everything else is only going to destroy wealth. If you behave randomly to random events that are happening all the time, it's very hard to make money. Or rather, I shouldn't say make money, but very hard to create wealth.
That's true maybe for wealth, for life, everything. By the way, you had me scared for a minute out there. I was wondering, why is it that I'm not getting a chance to talk to Rhythm again? But okay, no. Well, long life, all 20 fingers crossed for that. Long period in the equity markets for all of us to gain from your wisdom. But so let's talk about the framework then, Rhythm. What's, to your mind, the framework as we look forward to the next 12 months?
So the framework is as follows. Coming out of COVID, I think the government and the central bank tightened. And I'm referring here only to India right now. We'll come to the world a little later. Because of the fear that inflation will surge. It was the right policy to do. Because coming out of COVID, there was so much pent-up demand. It was likely that inflation would have surged. And my God, were they successful. Okay. Supremely successful. India came out of COVID with the least inflation problem relative to the whole planet. Everybody else was grappling with much more inflation, including China. So that was a hugely successful policy. But as usual, when you are very successful, it takes time to turn the ship. Right? The ship doesn't turn as quickly. The ship is of that nature. India is a very big country and you can't turn this thing around at will. And so we arrived in 2024, and because of extraneous circumstances, it was an election year, spending got curtailed, and we had a really bad monsoon, in terms of heavy rains. So by the September quarter, real rates were high, and the fiscal deficit was annualizing at 3.4%, down from 6%, so it had halved. So invariably it caused the economy to slow. And I think a decision was taken that we need to pivot. It takes time to move the ship. The pivot happened in February with the RBI policy, and it has been followed by a cumulative interest rate cut, CRR cut, infusion of massive liquidity, deregulation of lending, and a big stimulus from the government, which is very sweet because it's not inflationary stimulus, but it's disinflationary. Nevertheless, all of this put together in stock market terms is what we call as reflation, which is India, after many years, is trying to get its inflation higher. So we've been in a disinflationary mode, policy mode, since 2014, because at the time we were running double-digit inflation, so we had to bring it down. It took many years for us to bring it down, and then it has gone and swung to the other side as it usually does, and now we're trying to reflate. Reflation is super good for equities.
Okay.
It's super good for profits, super good for revenues. So the one framework that people should have is that the next 12 months ought to be a whole lot better than the last 12 months. It'll be a whole lot better.
Okay.
Now the caveat is the world, so we'll come to that, but that's the framework. When the central bank is reflating, you don't fight it. It's stupid to fight a central bank that has got its foot on the pedal for reflation, and the government is cooperating with it. So it's a combined policy. And this is also being marked, almost not noticed, because I was meeting a set of institutional clients last week, and they're not even noticed the amount of reform that is happening at the state level. Just take the case of Maharashtra government. Okay, it has allowed labor to work longer. It has allowed establishments to be open 24/7, and it has launched a capital subsidy scheme for GCCs. You look at what Telangana has done to its electricity sector, and we don't have the time here to go through details, but the state level reform is at another level now. And I've been saying this, that there's only that much the center can do. Unless the states cooperate and also do their bit, it's difficult to lift this. But let me say this here, that we were running a template for 6.5% growth because we had to curb inflation. I think now the template has shifted to 8% growth. And I'm not referring, don't get fooled by the real growth of the last quarter. It's nominal growth that matters.
Yeah.
So nominal growth with modest inflation is the mix for equities. So we're going into a period where real growth probably goes to 7.5, inflation goes to say 3.5 or 4, and therefore we have nominal growth of somewhere between 10 and 11, which will support earnings growth in excess of 15%. That, I think, is the framework for the next 12 months.
Yeah, but this is great if it happens, right? But we indeed see growth at 7.5. So you think this whole push of the central bank plus the consumption push that the government has given leads to that 7.5% growth? Or is there something else on the global side that needs to fall into place?
The world obviously is a messy place. I said that last year also, and I'll say it this year, and I'll keep saying this until it all falls apart.
Okay.
Because I don't know when it will, but it is heavily indebted. It is aging. And on top of it, we clearly have a crisis of confidence with respect to the medium of exchange or currency.
Yep.
So that is certainly brewing in the background. And this started with the reneging of contractual obligations that came out of the Ukraine-Russian war, and continues to be the case. And that's probably the reason why there is such a big bid on gold. You cannot actually just ignore that.
The one in 2022, right?
Yeah. So you cannot ignore the bid on gold, and it is clearly, I have a chart which I have been using for 25 years, which is Sensex in gold terms. It's gone like this.
Oh, yes.
Right? And you can buy, this is just about the least amount of ounces you get with the Sensex as you have in the last, say, 40 years, with the exception of the low in COVID, the low in 2008, the low in 2000. So those were all crisis moments. We have no crisis here. So we are kind of trading at crisis valuations, near about, in the equity markets. And it matters because somebody said, why would you measure this in gold terms? Well, it ought to be measured because gold is still the quintessential store of value. And therefore, it is important to rebase all assets in gold terms. And very briefly, I'll say gold is not an asset. An asset, by definition, is something that yields an income. So equities, because it gives dividend; real estate, because it gives rent; fixed, bonds, because it gives you interest. A fixed deposit, because it gives you interest. Gold gives you nothing. It's a store of value. It can be a medium of exchange, but it's a very onerous medium of exchange. It's very hard to store and carry gold in your pocket and buy a cup of coffee with gold. And those things have not been done now for many centuries.
Yeah.
Right? It was at one point in time, gold was used as a medium of exchange, but today it is very hard. So, therefore, it's important to look at asset prices relative to gold, or in gold terms, because gold is the quintessential store of value. It's no different from looking at the Sensex in dollar terms, because dollar is supposed to be a store of value. Or INR terms, because INR is supposed to be a store of value. Well, it's not such a good store of value, but it is still a store of value. The INR that you're carrying in your pocket will have the same value tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
May not have the same value 1 year down from now, but it has the same value tomorrow morning. So there is some store of value. The stocks you hold in your portfolio may be down 20% in one day. So they don't have any store of value attached to it. So I think there is a lot of I would say difficulty in the global environment, which may feed into India's economy. India is not a small cap stock. It's a big country with it's a big player in the world with a growing trade with the world, and therefore will get affected by what happens in the world. For example, if the US goes into recession, we cannot come out unscathed. Our growth rate can't go to 7.5. There will be some impact, as it has happened in the past. The impact will be a lot less today than it has been in the past, but there will still be impact. So yeah, I cannot for sure say that the growth will be at a certain level, because I don't know how these global events pan out. I don't know how geopolitics pans out. But these seem to be less settled right now than we would have hoped for.
Okay, so the follow-up is, if the US economy doesn't go into a tailspin, but the US markets, led by the AI frenzy coming off, peter off, can Indian markets do well? Because I have now heard you say enough number of times that India is the low beta market. It'll do well, it'll do less well on the upside when everybody's doing well, but it'll probably do well when not everything is doing well, right?
Yeah.
In some sense.
So
can that happen?
Yeah, so this I will answer a question that you've not yet asked, is why foreign investors are not buying in.
I was going to come there afterwards.
No, because this dovetails into that.
Okay, let's do that.
So three reasons.
Yeah.
Right? One is that they still have a problem with India's absolute valuations. The relative valuations now are a whole lot better. 1 year ago, China was at 9x, India was at 20x. China is now at 15 times earnings, India is still at 20. So relative to China, India is more attractive than it has been for most of the last 25 years. In fact, relative to emerging markets as a cohort, India is more attractive than it's been for most of the last 25 years. Okay, so this is clearly now the relative valuation is good, but the absolute is still where it was. It has not moved a lot. I mean, earnings have not grown that much and share prices have not moved that much. So we're still dealing with a 20 handle on the earnings multiple.
Yeah.
The second is that India has no AI trade.
Yes.
And especially in the last 6 months, the world has been all about the AI trade. And contrary to popular perception, the US markets have not done well.
As a full cohort. I mean, just
SPX has not done as well, because SPX still has a large share of non-AI trades, which have been dogs. Whereas markets with a large proportion of AI trades,
Taiwan,
ex-Europe, where defense has been the theme. So defense and AI have been driving a lot of markets up 20, 30, 40%. That's what markets are up in the last 12 months. And that's why it feels like India has been in a bear market. Because if you bought China, you'd be up 40% relative to India in US dollar terms. And the third reason foreigners have not been able to participate is because the domestic bid doesn't go away. So they are up against domestic bid, which means they need to take share prices a lot higher before domestics actually offer stock. So that's the reason why foreigners have not been there. And this dovetails into your point, which is, if at some point in time the AI trade unwinds, and mind you, if it's a crash like 2000, then all bets are off. No market can survive a crash like that. India will perform relatively better, but who cares? Because things can be down 40%, India can be down a lot less, but it will still hurt. But India will outperform. If the AI trade wanes, then I think you will see both absolute and relative performance from India.
Okay.
And that is, I think, the key. So it is not about, and the second thing is also about growth, is that on its own, if India's growth improves, then it will offer a better opportunity, which I think is almost a given now, that India's growth will be a whole lot better in 2 quarters from now. I don't know about the AI trade. I have no expertise to judge when and where the AI trade pops and how it pops and where it goes. But that is another key.
Yeah, I think the two gentlemen you mentioned were also divided on that opinion, right, around whether it's a bubble or not. So it's completely fine. But
well, I can spend a minute on this.
Please do.
So I think embodied AI
is really good coffee.
Embodied AI is here to stay. That is not going to. That's not going to fade. I think it's a real thing. It's a real technology shift. It's like the horse carriage movement of the 1890s, when Ford brought the car into the U.S. markets, and horse carriage was the mode of commute in New York City, and in 10 years a large number of horse carriage families died in poverty if they refused to move or become a taxi driver or reskill. So embodied AI, I think, does present that challenge. It's probably not happening in the next 5 years, but 10 years down the line, I'll tell you the risk. It's not about our IT engineers. Our IT engineers are not at risk. Our IT engineers will build AI for the world. So this notion, I think it's just completely wrong that Indian IT engineers will be replaced by AI. What I worry about is the domestic helps. They can be replaced because the stuff that China is doing is, these domestic helps that they're creating as robots, you can abuse them. They don't need vacations. And most critically, they'll never ask for a loan. Now see, it solves for a lot of problems that we have while managing domestic helps. You can leave the house to them. There's not going to be any risk of anything getting lost. And they apparently will learn from how you do things. So you will not probably complain either on the quality of work that they do. And they won't be very expensive. The last thing I saw is retailing at 20 lakh rupees. And once this thing scales, it will become 10 lakhs. The households in India that afford domestic helps can easily replace them. Now that's a huge number of people out of employment.
Yeah.
Out of employment in India straight away. So I do worry about that.
Okay.
Are we there? No, we're not there because it's not scaled. China will have to produce like 20 million of them just for India. And then India will have to agree to import them with low import duties. And then, you'll need a service network, etc., etc. So it'll take time, but we'll get there. So embodied AI is, I think, a risk, which is converting AI into a physical thing, whether it's driving a car, whether it's a domestic help, whether it is working in heavy industries, etc. LLMs, I'm not so sure. LLMs, I feel are like search engines. And it didn't really matter that India never had a search engine of its own. We all used Google free of cost, and it never hurt us. Okay, so the really advanced LLMs will have a subscription, but they'll be pretty accessible and we'll all be using them in 5 years. Everybody will be using LLMs, but they don't seem to be the threat.
Okay.
The threat is embodied AI. So that is on AI in my view, but again, we'll find out in the next few years. Now, is this a bubble or not? Well, things trading at 100 times earnings always smells like a bubble. Because when you do the math, something that has to be justified, this will have to grow 20-25% every year for the next 5-7 years, 10 years. Of course they can do it.
Yeah.
But the risk that they don't do it is also pretty pertinent. And that is the problem about buying stocks that are at high multiples, is that a delivery has to happen. And if you buy 20 stocks, you may still be fine because 5 of them will succeed, 15 will fade. And those 5 hopefully compensate for the 15 that go away. But if you buy 1 or 2 expensive stocks and it doesn't work because there is a failure in delivery, then you don't make money.
Okay. Depends on the size of the wallet, I guess, then, and how much you can diversify. Okay, great. But Rhythm, then, therefore, the key question, the FII client comes back when growth in India starts to move ahead, right? It
Three
has to be
things.
that.
Three things.
Necessary condition.
One is you need corporate issuances to start, because I don't think the domestic bid is going to go away. So
Right.
somebody has to supply the shares that they have to buy. So that's a technical point.
So you're actually saying that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, it's a very good thing.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
a very good thing.
You isn't crying horse that अरे कितना supply है. You are saying अच्छा है.
No, supply has not got anywhere. I'll give you the stats. At the peak of the 07 bull market, supply reached 3% of GDP.
Okay.
In current terms, that's $120 billion. That's $10 billion a month for 12 months on the trot. We're not there anywhere close. We're not getting there in the next 3-4 years. There's not that much capital that corporate India can raise. Okay, so I think it's a long way. In fact, in an ongoing bull market, assuming this is midway through its life, so this is half life, it's good to have supply. And I think it tempers the price movement, and it brings a bit of stability to the market. So supply will allow foreigners to buy. Second is, of course, they'll want to see growth turn. There's a great deal of skepticism that this reflation will not work, which is a good starting point. Because if everybody was confident, then it would have been in the price. So it's not in the price. This is my judgment.
Sure.
But I can also see it in the relative valuations. I can see it in a host of sentiment indicators that I track, that things are not in the price. And the third thing is this AI trade. That will be a sweetener, icing on the cake.
Okay.
If the AI trade fades, I think almost everybody globally will look at India.
The interesting thing is, Ridham Desai, in the last 20 minutes, you haven't once mentioned Donald Trump and the India-US tariff piece.
I don't think that's very critical.
No?
No, it's a sentiment thing. From a macroeconomic perspective, it's 1.2% of GDP, 1.3%, it's 2% of our workforce. Of course, there are certain MSMEs that are hurting, but it's not going to bring India down. It'll hurt us if it stays for a whole year, then 30 basis points of GDP. You've already offset that with a massive reflation.
No, but from the foreign inflow perspective.
So sentiment-wise, yes. If it happens, then people will get excited for a day or two, and then that trade will fade away. The real deal is if the growth data accompanies it, then it will sustain, and if some supply comes in, then it will sustain further. Now, see, from a stock market perspective, the foreign bid is not important, but from a macro perspective, or rather I should say it is far more important from a macro perspective than a stock market perspective. This is the opposite of how India used to be just until 10 years ago, where the foreign bid was important from both angles. But now it is largely not so consequential for the stock market. It is far more consequential for the macro, because the foreign money that comes in on a daily basis gives flexibility to the central bank to manage forex reserves and liquidity. And if there are constant outflows, it just makes it more challenging. And I'll just add one more point to the foreign bid, which I should not forget, is the rupee is 5% undervalued on a real effective basis. So not only are the relative valuations on earnings here, the rupee is here. So if you are a foreign investor, you're going to get a double. Rupee goes back to fair value, that's 5%. Markets go up 10%, so you get 15%. Dollar returns look really attractive on a forward 1 year basis if you have that appetite. Most foreigners don't have a 1 year appetite.
Okay, interesting.
One more point on the foreign investors is that the whole thing, this selling, has got aggravated because of passive. So see, last year what happened was India's weight in the world and emerging market index went like this. It crossed China. Since then, because China has done so well, it has come down.
Yeah.
Every time the weight goes down, passive money has to sell, because they have to reflect that weight. They're neutral, right? So passive selling aggravates this. The opposite happens once the market turns.
Right.
So once India recovers relative performance to China, the opposite trade happens, and then it kind of becomes a virtuous cycle. So this is now far more exaggerated than it used to be in the past, because passive has become so big. So passive now controls the incremental share price momentum much more than it did in the past.
Okay, well, a lot of gems in this conversation, Ridham Desai. Thank you so much. This was truly special. Thank you for this lovely conversation.
Thank you so much, Neeraj.
Well, viewers, Ridham Desai said that the Manish Chokhani and Ridham Desai interview was the one-on-one on investing. Yeah, that's what I said, right? Manish Chokhani.
Ridham Desai.
Okay, sorry. Manish Chokhani and Ramesh Dhawan interview was the one-on-one on investing. This one was truly exceptional as well. I hope you can go back and listen to this 2-3 times for multiple insights into investing and life. Thank you so much for joining in today.